Tensions between Japan and China have worsened in recent days. This comes after Japan tracked a Chinese vessel in its waters around the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea. It was the first such incursion in more than a year. But it's not just Japan that's worried. Here's more.
It's called Senkaku in Japan, WION in China. This group of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea has for years been a bone of contention between the two countries. China is now stepping up the offensive. Earlier this week, a Chinese frigate entered waters surrounding the islands and planted the country's flag on one of the islands.
I must emphasize again that the Diaoyu Island and its affiliated islands have been inherited territories of China. China's sovereignty over the Diaoyu Islands have sufficient support of historical, jurisprudential evidence. Japan's behavior can't change the objective fact that the Diaoyu Islands belong to China, nor can they shake our steadfast determination to safeguard China's sovereignty over the Diaoyu Islands.
The Japanese lodged a strong protest, but Beijing is undeterred. It has now come out with an ad in the Washington Post claiming that the island belongs to it and not Japan. The islands are near oil and gas reserves, key shipping lanes, and of rich fishing waters. But there are deeper worries. China has consistently been expanding its claims over East China Sea. It has also been building artificial islands and building strategic bases in the South China Sea. China has been pushing neighbours, including India, on its land frontier, even while increasing its zone of influence with trade and economic deals with others such as Pakistan. The ripple effects of the East China Sea dispute is thus radiating far and wide. Strategic affairs expert Brahma Chelani tweeted, and I quote, "After sending a frigate and perhaps a sub into the waters near the Senkakus, Beijing takes out an ad in Washington Post claiming the Japanese-controlled islands belong to China. What's next? An ad proclaiming India's Arunachal state belongs to China?" Earlier this week, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi raised concern too, telling a gathering in Delhi that New Delhi does not covet other people's resources or territory. Faced with a common threat, China, India, Japan, Australia and the US are building their own strategic quad grouping. Bureau Report, WION.
Now, the islands have been disputed for quite some time now. What is the territorial row all about? Take a look at this report.
China calls them Diaoyu. In Japan, they're known as Senkaku. Whatever the name, both countries claim this cluster of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea. Their first historical mention, according to Chinese sources, was in a 15th century document published during China's Ming dynasty. In 1895, Japan annexed the islands, later leasing them to a Japanese entrepreneur who set up a fish processing plant there. But by the start of the Second World War, the islands were deserted once again. Years later, in 1969, a United Nations report suggested the seabed around the islands could be rich in oil reserves. Both China and Taiwan promptly declared ownership in 1971, but a year later the islands were returned to Japan after years of US occupation. Although they've since been formally controlled by Tokyo, Chinese ships are regularly seen sailing close by. And activists from China and Japan have landed on the disputed territory to raise their national flag. Simmering tensions between the two countries boiled over again when the Japanese government bought the islands from a private Japanese owner in September 2012. Widely considered a provocation in China, the move has sparked numerous anti-Japan protests.